All right. Happy election night. Over the past few days, I've seen a lot of posts regarding unity and support for America, no matter who wins the election. Thank you for people doing that. I completely agree. At the same time, I hope everyone recognizes that kind of unity is only possible if everyone feels it was a fair election and all the votes were counted. It's likely we're not going to know the winner when we go to bed tonight. And as much as we all want to know, it's okay if we don't. I think it's not a matter of debate that it's much more important that we have an accurate vote count than to have a fast vote count. And that process is more complicated than I realized. A lot of you are probably familiar with what some people are calling the blue mirage, the red mirage. I'm not going to get into that, but what I really didn't understand was how and when votes were counted, and I think it's important to understand. First of all, it's important to know that states have a lot of leeway in how they run elections. Every state makes their own rules, which means different rules about who can vote by mail, how votes are counted, when votes are counted, etc. Also, this year it looks like 60 to 70% of all votes will be cast early, before Election Day. States have been expanding the vote by mail programs over the past couple of decades, and then even more this year because of the pandemic. So, what happens on election night is going to vary widely state by state in terms of when votes are counted. Now, here's one of the big things that I didn't realize. In most states, the early votes are not counted until after the day of election votes. They don't want votes to be counted beforehand while polls are still open, because then if results got out while people are still voting, obviously that's bad. So here's what happens in most states after the polls close, which is usually around 8 o'clock. Right after the polls close, the ballots go from all the different polling places to some county government office where votes are counted. These are the election day ballots. They're processed pretty quickly once they get there, and that's when we start hearing results. Meanwhile, the mail-in votes still haven't been counted. They've been sitting in locked rooms, and those votes are not counted until after the day of votes are counted. The other important thing about mail-in votes is they take longer to process because all those ballots have to go through a signature verification process. That can always take a long time, but obviously with more mail-in votes this time, it can take a lot longer. So there could be a big difference in terms of when different states finish counting all their ballots. By the way, I said this how most states do it. There are exceptions. One big exception is Florida. Their mail-in ballots actually go through the signature verification process before Election Day, which I think is great. They don't count the votes, they don't even open the ballots, but they've verified the signatures before polls close, and that allows Florida to count mail-in ballots much more quickly on election night. Now, like I said, I hope all Americans can agree that we need to count all the votes. That shouldn't be controversial. But where it gets potentially contentious is that polling says a much higher percentage of Democrats are voting early and much higher percentage of Republicans are voting on election day. I think that makes sense. As President Trump has questioned the security of mail-in voting, it makes sense that more of his supporters would choose to vote at a polling site on election day. So then when you look at how votes are counted, typically day of votes counted first and reported first, and then the mail-in votes counted and taking longer to process because of signature verification. That means in a lot of places they will be counting largely Republican votes early, followed by largely Democrat votes. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it does set up a scenario where people could go to bed on election night with one candidate ahead in a certain state, and then over the next hours and days, as more votes are counted, the leader of the race could change. President Trump has been making statements about counting all votes on election night, but he knows it may take longer than that. He has said he doesn't think we should have to wait a long time to find the results. But I hope our president knows that counting all the votes is what's important, not getting results quickly. I really hope this election doesn't drag out. I don't want it to. But I think you can see there's a real possibility for anger as all the votes are being counted, especially if states flip after election night. And I hope that good Americans, no matter where you stand politically, will call for everyone to remain calm and make sure all legal votes are counted. I really believe that's something we all can agree on. There's a lot more detail on this, by the way, and I borrowed heavily from a podcast from the Lincoln Project on this topic. I'll provide the link in the comments below. I highly recommend it. It's excellent. As always, I think I've got all this info right. If I've got something wrong, please let me know. I'll correct it. Thank you all. Have a great evening. Good night.